Well, speaking about going against the cause, you have Republicans rising up, going against the whole idea of fact checking that's being misused and mishandled by Facebook. So we have an economist here slams Facebook for absolutely Orwellian fact checking, upholding Biden's recession denial. Now, if you recall, and I'm sure many of you either who watch the show or some other outlet have heard that Karine Jean-Pierre was literally redefining what a recession was. I mean, you had progressive leftists just streaming to Wikipedia to ultimately redefine it in real time. I mean, they had hours upon hours of people trying to redefine Wikipedia's definition of what a recession was. We did a short here on the Bald Brad Show where we just showed, wasn't me personally, but we used a clip of another person showing what the definition was in the financial dictionary of what a recession was. Then I went and used what other countries classify as a recession as well, per what we utilize here in gross domestic product of 2 negative quarters. So we exposed it. They don't want to admit it. But now when we use the actual definition of what a recession is, Facebook's fact checking people. It's crazy. Social media giant Facebook is taking heat for its censorship policies yet again. This time after a senior research fellow from the American Institute of Economic Research, he thinks he knows a little bit something about research there in terms of economics, I would say so, was flagged for setting the record straight on what he constitutes as a recession. Quote, it's absolutely Orwellian, economist Philip Magnus told Fox and Friends First of the censorship attempt on Monday. This is what he had to say.
Sticking with this economic front and also with a social media tie-in, Facebook is now policing individuals who question the White House's definition of recession, fact-checking industry experts speaking out on the state of the economy. That top economist, research and education director at the American Institute for Economic Research, Philip Magnus, joins me now. Philip, good morning to you. Let's start at the beginning. What did you say in your Facebook post that Facebook fact-checked?
Well, I basically shared a screenshot of the White House's own website where they attempted to redefine the concept of inflation. And economists have traditionally defined this term as 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, which is the old textbook definition for inflation. It's kind of a shorthand, but it's something that works. It describes almost all recessions we've had in the United States over the past century. And yet just sharing that caused Facebook to flag it and put a fact check notice on my page.
And you were fact-checked for just stating the textbook definition of inflation. So when the fact-checkers get it wrong and fact-check something that is accurate, where does that leave us? I guess that's why you're calling this Orwellian.
It is absolutely Orwellian. It is a political entity. It was PolitiFact in this case that partners up with Facebook, stepping in and basically carrying water on behalf of the White House for political reasons, not economic reasons.
Well, have you complained to Facebook at all? Sometimes when they do something this egregious and it gets media attention, they say, well, it was labeled, misinformation and error. Has that happened yet? Have you had any conversation with the platform?
I've had nothing in return from them. I did share a screenshot of the post, basically saying that sunlight's the best disinfectant here, and it did go viral. So it drew attention to the fact that they're using political talking points in lieu of actual fact checking. They're stepping in and becoming partisan actors here. Yeah,
they certainly are. This is truly unbelievable. It's not the first time something like this happened. It certainly won't be the last. But because you're here, we want to use your resources in 2 ways and ask you about the economy. What do you make of this Inflation Reduction Act? We were just talking about the Penn-Wharton model that said that it would slightly increase inflation. What do you think about that? Is that true?
Not according to Jen Psaki.
Right. I am absolutely concerned about it. I think the White House is playing catch up. The real problem here is they ignored inflation as an issue for basically the last year. They were calling it transitory. They were pretending it would just magically go away. And now they're finding themselves above 9% year over year as the projected inflation rate. And they're trying to play catch up, but they're playing catch up very ineffectively, just going back to the old tax and spend habits that have been the Joe Biden agenda from the beginning.
So if you were advising the president right now, what would you tell him to do with 9.1% inflation?
quit your job?
First off, I would say we need to be honest with the American people. Quit this almost like Nixonian language of trying to manipulate the terms, manipulate what's actually going on. We need to confront the fact that inflation is occurring right now. And part of that is because we fell asleep on the watch. The Federal Reserve kind of fell asleep. Its historical mandate has always been price stability, and it strayed away from that into things like climate change and diversity, DEI initiatives, ESG investing. And because of that, it really kind of missed the mark. It missed all the emerging evidence that we had an inflationary crisis underway. So simply getting back to the fact of that and acknowledging it, confronting it honestly is the first step the White House needs to take.
And he makes great points here. And it's kind of in reference to the kind of the Great Reset, this climate initiative that all these companies are doing. Furthermore, what our own government's doing, and the lack of initiative from the Federal Reserve, where they should have been increasing rates early on. Honestly, even during Trump's time. I know Trump didn't like the fact that they were even talking about increasing interest rates. And that's something I disapproved from the Trump administration of. Sometimes you need that to help ultimately regulate the economy. You don't want it to increase too much because it could spiral into inflation. You don't want it to decrease too much as well because you could spiral into a recession and also have inflation at the same time, which is kind of what we're seeing right now. So that's what I didn't like from Trump, because he didn't understand that stability and ultimately the power the Federal Reserve have. I know that kind of has a bad PR look in terms of administration of where things are going, but that's just a fluctuation of where the economy's at, and they should have been taking more of an initiative. And by the way, the Federal Reserve admits as much as that they should have caught on to this a lot quicker. But when you have the focus on this climate change, on spending, want to put like $400 billion here, $275 billion there, cash out stimulus checks, do all these things. And then they're sitting here going like, oh, well, we're just in a transitory period. We're transitioning. Yes, like we've all been saying since Biden's been in office, we're transitioning into something not good, which is called inflation, which is called recession. We've been saying it for quite some time. The White House doesn't want to admit it. Didn't want to admit it back then. Now they're redefining it so they could fit their narrative of not admitting it. And so now they still hold true according to the fact checkers on Facebook, which is mind blowing. Remember how Facebook was like, oh, well, we want to curb like all this Russian disinformation on Facebook. We want to curb all these people spreading conspiracy theories and falsehoods and stuff like that. We've literally gotten to the point where you can actually say a fact on social media, not just Facebook, but anywhere, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, whatever it may be. You can actually say like a man is a man, like an actual biological man is a man, and be removed off Twitter, off Facebook, off these social media platforms. It's literally Orwell's 1984 in real time. If you haven't read that or it's been a while, pick it up again, because God, you are seeing just the moves that the Democrat Party and the progressive left are putting in place to make that book freaking true. It is so mind-bending, so mind-blowing on how much he's gotten right from 1984, the novel, to 2022. It's like I said, it's just mind-blowing, and Democrats aren't awakened to it, as you just saw from The View, as you just see from what these social media giants are doing. And I love that he talked about the ESG scores, because banks are doing this right now actively declining people, or the pursuit of declining people for certain things, investments, loans, things like that, credit cards, because their ESG score is so low. And I got a lot of the information from Glenn Beck from his novel, The Great Reset, on how that's has a possibility of being utilized to get loans, to get certain credit in order to obtain certain things from these banks. If your environmental score, or if you're not being conscious of the things that you say and do, all this stuff gets taken into account. You can have a low score, and ultimately the banks will not serve you, because ultimately the elites don't want the banks to serve you. Crazy book. Again, it's called The Great Reset by Glenn Beck. I think it is worth the read. It is a quick read. Like I said, I almost read it in one evening myself. I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Bald Brad Show. If you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all our future content.